Okay, okay, everybody, I've frozen again. So, for everybody, welcome to the fifth session. We're going to be looking at rupture and repair. Sort of sounds like a gynecological lecture, doesn't it, really? Sorry.
Oh, now I got a vision of that. Thanks.
Everyone just crosses their legs. And just for those listening, welcome. Just a heads up that I'm having a bit of a technical problem with my camera tonight, and if it does become an issue, I'll turn my video off so it'll hopefully become less annoying, and I might do that when we come into the PowerPoint, so we'll see how we go. But it would be nice to check in and see how everyone's traveling from last session. And the reflection question for this session, we're going to explore that during the session. But anything you wanted to share that's arisen, or any ahas, or basically just a really nice check-in from everyone. So who'd like to go first?
Well, I can go. I missed the last one that you had, but I did listen to it after. I apologize because I wasn't able to attend for a family thing that I was at. But I was listening to you when, you talked a lot about, picked up a bit of the Wim Hof kind of method that you were learning as well. And I think when I talk about, the trauma, the mind, body, soul connection, I come from a fairly interesting space when it becomes the mind and what you're talking about, because I heard you say in there the mind is quite powerful over, holding your breath for say 4 minutes or something like that. Because I've come from a bit of an athlete background, I think it's interesting for me personally. I've taken that to an extreme, to the opposite end, where I've had to be in tune with my own body, to listen more intently, because in sport and as an athlete, you're taught to mind over body, and we push our pain threshold over and over again. And in my life, I've had that in a health perspective, where I've taken it to a degree where essentially, one time even I had a simple appendicitis, and the surgeon said to me one time that, my appendix was gangrenous and pussy, when he said he had a 40-year-old man come after me screaming in pain, and his appendix was slightly pink on one side. So to that degree, I've had to learn how to tune back into the body in a way that, in a health perspective, I'm listening differently compared to what you learn as an athlete, to keep pushing the body beyond its limits. So I found that really interesting when you were talking about it, because I do come from a bit of a different kind of, I guess, the other extreme to that extent.
Yeah, and I suppose the thing I discovered with the Wim Hof, it's not about not listening to your body, but it's actually about not listening to your head making a commentary about what your body can and can't do. So there's a distinction there. So the breath practices, for example, when first started, there was a real panic to actually hold your breath for a certain period of time. But then more when you sort of enter this more meditative state and just breathe. So it's not a forcing. So you stop when the body's not feeling comfortable. You don't push through the discomfort. But as you work through it, what tends to happen is your body starts to trust the process a little bit more, and you discover that the body can actually do more than what the brain is saying it can do. The challenge is when the mind comes in to make it a task, or you must do this. And that's when the body's signals can get overridden. And it was interesting in that Wim Hof thing that I noticed a lot of people, there were two groups of people. One that saw this as an opportunity to beat their bodies up and push themselves to really strong, not healthy limits. And the other group of people that were more curious and kind, and wondering how much more unused capacity they had in their body, but not sort of that, almost like that athletic, like I will, get to, I will get to 6 minutes holding my breath sort of thing. It was an interesting distinction.
And it's funny you say it, because I was an underwater swimmer, so in terms of breath, I would learn under that, my heart rate would decrease while I was actually underwater and physically exerting myself. you know, because the idea in your mind is that you're working out is going to be harder when actually my
Yes.
heart rate would decrease in that time.
It's interesting, isn't it? Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
But I suppose to relanguage it in a non-Wim Hof way,
Yeah.
I found the practice to be could be one of kindness and attention, or one of brutality and overriding, depending on how you came to the practice.
Yeah, Yeah, and I find like the language, and that's interesting because I can understand, you know, to the degree what you were saying, those two groups of people, and
Yes.
how you can adapt to one side and then the other.
Exactly. And people getting upset that they couldn't get to 5 minutes, for example, rather than celebrating they got to 4 or something like that. You know, it's a weird thing. Yeah. But, interesting.
Yeah.
Thank you, Rachel. And we missed you last time, so I'm glad that you could make today.
I'm glad to be back.
Fantastic. Okay, so it looks like Meg's got her dinner. You got your dinner, Meg?
No, I don't yet. I'm so hungry. I haven't eaten enough today.
Why don't you start in case your dinner arrives?
Yeah, thank you. Oh gee. So I mean, I won't keep you all night, but I've had a really turbulent 2 weeks, and I've just this afternoon had my own therapy session as well. So I've sort of nicely digested what's been a sort of physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually taxing couple of weeks for lots of different reasons. But I guess I'm really keen to hear your thoughts and ideas about rupture and repair tonight, Shirley, because I think I haven't really experienced rupture and repair in my receiving of therapy, but I certainly have had to repair ruptures in my early career so far, and I'm fortunate to have a supervisor who's interested in what they're calling deliberate practice, which is about, as the name infers, deliberately practicing for things that often come up in therapy, rupture being one of them. So I feel quite confident now in navigating, like recognizing ruptures and navigating them at the time. I guess personally in my own life, I'm discovering the beauty and value of rupture repair within my own intimate partner relationship. So it's really, really profound stuff, and it's one of my favorite things to talk about. So I'm really keen to, and like part of the stress of the last 2 weeks on top of everything else has been that one of the young people that I am case managing, her her mother being sort of directing a lot of her distress and anger towards me and requesting different case manager and making very personal and like big ruptures around me. And unfortunately, you know, for me, being kind of blocked from having an opportunity to do the repair work with the actual client that I would like to do because of an angry and distressed mother situation. So yeah, it's complex and convoluted, but I'm keen to talk more about.
Yes, that's another layer of complexity that we won't explore tonight, but it's always hard when there's more than one person in the room that you're having to deal with, and it does shape the work and impact the work. You know, like that's a nice way to stop on the camera. That you know, we sometimes can push clients because we know that the other person's wanting something, and how can we stay strong in our practice and keep the client in front of us and be able to park the other person somewhere far, far away. And it can be very hard, particularly when the client needs that person as a carer and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, Meg, thank you. Kate.
Hi.
Hi.
Oh, wow, Meg, I really admire that you do that work. If that's the right word, like I just can't imagine doing that anymore. I mean, once upon a time, but it's like far out. Like just when you said having more than one person in the room, it just fucks up everything, I swear. It just totally, I mean, it's even because
a title for a book. It fucks up everything.
I just know even with one influence of like them wanting you to stop using drugs. Like, far out, it just changes the whole dynamic, you know. So how, you know, if you've got a few family members and particularly parents, Jesus. Oh, anyway, sorry. Well done.
Lovely.
For me, I've actually had a few clients, I have to say. I haven't. So I do like, I'm a matching psychologist as well. So we have like 30 psychologists in our practice or whatever. And so they'll have like a half an hour session with me, and I'll, you know, because I know them all, and I'll, you know, I never match them with myself.
Can you just explain that for me? Because I'm getting a sense of a speed dating for psychologists here.
I know,
Is that what it is?
I know this is like, seems like Tinder, doesn't it? You know, like where I'm showing profiles here of these people. It basically is, you know, it is like, but the whole idea, I guess, is that if you don't like the psychologist, you know, a lot of people just don't go back. And so then they'll come to me. I'm kind of that middle person. It's like, oh, what's happened? And we don't even have to have anything to do with that person. And, you know, the person that I'll see, and then they'll see somebody else. There's always a couple of matches. But sometimes, occasionally, I get them to come back to me because, of course, I've been that first port of call in a way. You know, it's flattering in one sense, but it's like, in another way, I don't know that I want them. But I have had a few that's happened. And they're a lot more complex, I would say. So, I guess, you know, I'm feeling a bit like Meg in a way, even though they're nowhere near as complex as the people that you have. I just like, oh man, he's got, like, there's a lot of stuff going on there. So anyway, I've been doing a lot of research and quite a bit of supervision around that, because I feel a bit, because I do put everything, I guess, in this box of, well, not box, like the sensory motor stuff. Like, I really am in that as much as I can be, as much as I know about it, I guess. And so when there's other things at play, I don't know, it makes it a bit complex for me in a way. It's like, oh, I need to be, does there need to be a diagnosis here? I don't know. Anyway, it's a bit furry. So that's for one client. But just running through the homework, I really enjoyed that. And there was this one part, the person that I listened to,
Ed Tronic.
Yep.
Or E-Tronic, as he prefers to be called, E.Tronic.
Was he? So I'm wondering if it's because we've listened to a few of them, but where he says he doesn't see clients anymore because he's not empathic, like he can't be empathic.
He's exhausted.
Love it.
It's too hard work, too much hard work.
Oh, isn't that great? Like, oh, you're awesome. Anyway, but I really felt sad at one point when he was, I loved it when he talked about, I think it was just the part about where there's been trauma in the womb or just after, and it's like you're born sensitive, like with a sensitive nervous system, if you like. And it's like, oh man, just to top it off, cop that, you know. Jeez. And that really explains a lot, because I have to say, and it was very, you know, it was on cue really for this complex person, because there was no trauma in his life. I'm like, you know, that's just doesn't look right. And then he talked about his parents being bankrupt while she was pregnant and had to go and move somewhere and do all these other things. And I thought, oh, bang, I reckon that's kind of it. I had a sense of that. But that was awesome information. Really great information. But it did, I'm thinking, oh boy. I guess we're trying to facilitate over time that window of tolerance, you know, increasing that. But and there's just, I don't know, it makes it, I don't know, I think I've got a big gut, you know, like I'm not sure what to do with that in a way, because there's a bit more than just that. And when I read even that trauma stuff, that was very jargon, I have to say. I'm not.
Yes, the research paper. I was hoping you just all quickly scanned it for the conclusions.
Yeah, I did end up there actually, which was great. Like, there's a lot of great stuff in it. So and I thought, I don't know, does that, I kind of then still feel I put it all in the box of, your nervous system is shit, you know, or whatever it needs, it's going through that, let's just do this practice kind of thing. In a sense, I don't know if I've got that wrong.
Yeah, that's very simple. No, that's it. It's about, I suppose, understanding where the nervous system dysregulation might start. And Ed's specialty is in early infant, in utero sort of stuff. That's really where his specialty is. People like him, Beatrice Beebe, these type of people that do a lot of sort of early infant research and developmental research, Dan Siegel and so on. And so if that's sitting there in the history, there's a higher likelihood that the person's already got a slightly fried nervous system before they even take their first breath. And then depending on how well the parents can attune and meet and match the baby, that can be repaired if you've got attentive parents. But if it's not, then that will just continue to become the template. So as the child matures, we get a very dysregulated adult. And so sometimes rupture can be such a small little thing because it's not necessarily verbal. And one of the things we'll look at tonight is that the repair isn't a thinking process or a cognitive process. It's more a relational, energetic, reparative process. And sometimes can just be attunement or catching it and saying, I'm thinking I just said something that was really bad. And can we just back up a bit and have a look at that? And for the client to know that you caught it. So the brain is very plastic and it's very reparable. But, you know, this is a discussion, rupture and repair is something that's only really been talked about in the last 10, 15 years. It's not like this is new, you know, it's not like this is old stuff. This is fairly new thought process that this is happening all the time. And how is it that it's happening? And sometimes what happens is that depending on the degree of nervous system dysregulation, that clients almost pull out of us the relational attention that's familiar. So you may have noticed with some clients, you're like Attila the Hun and you can't understand why, because it's not normally how you are. You've got no empathy for them. You really couldn't give diddly squat. You're aggravated, you're frustrated. And we need to be able to catch that and go, this is interesting. What's being created inside of me here from being with this nervous system? It's
the work, isn't it? Really?
Yes.
The rupture repair, that's the work. And I love
it's all the work.
Could you repeat what you said last time? Because you said something that I just love. You said something along the lines of, if you don't want to engage in rupture and repair, like go and be an accountant.
Go and be an accountant,
So good, because I really feel like when we talk about rupture and repair, it really is the masterclass of therapy, just to even just recognize it and catch it, as you say. And
regardless of your orientation, so whether you're CBT, psychodynamic, somatic, whatever it is, it doesn't really matter, because the repair is done within the model of your training, because it has to be congruent. But
it's theoretical.
Yeah, exactly. I like that. Yes, but it is about developing an awareness that it's going to be happening. And one thing I dispute in the paper that I gave you was, I think they said about 40% of their people had articulated ruptures. You know, only 40%, and it was only asking the clients. I know when you ask therapists will underreport. Will always underreport. Oh, the client loves me, you know. So it was good that it was looking at with clients, but sometimes ruptures are missed by the client because the engagement is familiar, but it's not healthy. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I didn't think of it like that. Yeah.
So as a therapist, we'll talk about it when we get into the presentation, but I go very much, it's not very scientific, I know, but more by feeling than thought. If my own nervous system is giving me some information about this other person's nervous system, I'm going to follow that, because that's actually got more truth in it than what my brain might be saying about this person. So that might be a little bit like, if I see a flicker in the person's eye and I get this feeling in my gut like, oh, rupture. But my brain says, oh, no, you're imagining it. I think they've just got wind or whatever. Keep going. I miss an opportunity. If I stop and say, can we just pause for a sec? Because I think something just happened then. When I said this, I'm wondering, are you aware of how that fell for you or what happened for you in that moment? You know, we go back. And then often when you catch those things that aren't even aware for the client, once it's repaired, they said, that answers so much for me about why I get so upset when blah, blah does. And I've never realized before that's what it is. So we have to, like, you know, if we have a really great session and we think that was really lovely, we had a nice cup of tea, I'm feeling really great about myself, then I'm wondering whether we've really done the work.
Yeah, that's right.
Because we need to be always on the working with the stuff that's arising all the time. And with heavily traumatized clients, it's a lot. There's a lot of stuff there. Yeah.
So just to catch that, Shirley, on our part, because I'm thinking I have someone in mind that does that. And, you know, and I find myself going into a pattern as well, you know, because of course it's made me feel a certain way. So, unfortunately, I think I went into my own style, my own pattern in that case of, I think, justifying myself because she's defensive of something. But is it like, oh, can we, like you said, you stop here and then you're pointing out, or no, you're not even pointing out, sorry, you're just asking what happened, really. Like,
Yeah,
something happened when I said that.
Yes. Or I may not want to point it out because it may feel too attention or shaming, and I might just say, actually, I notice we're just rushing on here. Could we just pull back a minute? I just want to take a moment to just reflect on what we just did then, or what we just said and what I said and what you said, and did that make sense? And I'm not sure if I really got it properly, or could we just check for a sec? And then there's an opportunity for inquiry. Like, go inside for a minute and see, is that feeling resolved and correct for you, or is it still not quite right?
Can you do that off? I mean, I always kind of toss up between how often I choose to do that. I mean, you could do it every second. Like, there's something there all the time. It's just like what your contact, like wanting to make contact with, I guess, and which area is that? You know, or because you make that choice in a way, don't you?
Well, yes, you can. Yes, you do make the choice, and I suppose doing it too often would be a rupture as well. You can tell the client starts to get really angsty at you.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, does it depend on? Well, I'm just thinking. You know, I guess I have a thing with, if it's recent trauma, I'll do that really often because it's the process. But if it's developmental trauma, there's a lot of narrative there, if you like. But I don't know. And I think there's 3 things, isn't there, with sensory motor, which path you go along. I forget the other one, actually. I don't know.
Also know that what we're doing here is not classically sensory motor.
Oh,
so,
sorry. Okay. Yep.
So, but what we might do is let's get into the work, and then I think it's going to answer some of these questions. Yeah. So let me just get this screen up. Now, I checked this earlier today. This should all work fine. One of the benefits you're going to receive from this is, because I had to upgrade everything, I've got a new version of PowerPoint. So I've gone ballistic tonight on my pictures just to play around with it because I thought I could. Now I'm going to turn my video off to stop it flashing. So, oh, look at that. There's a nice unflashing picture. Hopefully that won't flash. But I am here, and hopefully that will be less irritating for you, although you're being very kind around the flashing. So let's get into this. So once again, window of tolerance. We always start with this. So the work with repair and rupture is very much on the edges. And we'll have a little look at a model that Ed Tronick put together a little bit in a little while, which really talks about the work happens in the optimal arousal zone and on the edges. And we may even dip into the hypoarousal, or we may dip into the hyperarousal as part of this. And of course, rupture might signal a move into hyper or hypoarousal, or a withdrawal out of optimal. So we have to, this is where the attunement work becomes so critical. So if we've got a big client caseload, or we're exhausted, I was just working with a supervisee just before this session, and she's seeing far too many clients. She's doing 8 clients a day. It's far too many to be trying to do this work. You just can't work that way. You know, 5 or 6 max is the sort of number, because you need to have some space to actually be able to be tracking clients. Otherwise you miss too much. Yeah.
You may have time to regulate yourself too.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So some of the work of Tronic and Beatrice Beebe. So Beatrice was a supervisor of mine for a number of years, a really fascinating lady. And she's an intersubjectivist, but also has done a lot of work on early parent-child interactions. And I think she's got a huge Virgo affliction, because she'd take videos of these interactions and then she'd slow them down by frame. And she makes notes of all the little attunement things that are going on, all the little nuanced movements and all the, things. And we would take video of my work, and then she would slow it down and she'd be saying, now, what is that client telling you? Like, she was an expert in being able to really track, almost on an unconscious level, because she'd been doing it for so long, all these little signals that are being sent by the client that are very, very young. So it comes from this, and I love this little quote. Let me just, a sec, I've lost my mouse, all these damn pictures everywhere. I'm just gonna make it small for a sec. The quote, I know the way you can get when you have not had a drink of love. Your face hardens, your sweet muscles cramp. So this was from a Sufi poet, Hafiz. And for me, it speaks to when we're not attuned, we learn how people respond. So this sense of face hardening, muscles cramping, as a child, as an infant, we become very attuned to that, because it's about our survival. Yeah. So in the beginning, in a healthy upbringing, this concept of mutual regulation, where every child from birth should have the gift of safety. There should be this sense of safety where we can explore our world, explore ourselves in the world and in relation to others. And so in a healthy frame, there's a sense of inviting mistakes and learning within a frame of reassurance and love. So, I'm the youngest of 8, so there wasn't a lot left by the time I arrived in my family. And I think there's a lot of resentment from the eldest. There's not another one. So, sometimes, most probably not as much reassurance and love as could have been possible, but to learn and grow without shame. And for kids to find out they'll be okay despite anything that happens. And what comes out of that is a natural impulse to explore themselves and the world. Now, for many of us, our clients may not have had this. Okay. And in reality, I think this slide sort of explains the work that we do with our clients. Because in a way, there will be mistakes, and we want to invite mistakes and mess ups, but how we learn. So we learn from all the things that we're exploring, rather than it being a diagnosis, or rather it being, oh yeah, that's what happens when you're borderline personality, this is what you do, that we hold this frame of developmental repair so that clients can feel a non-shaming space. And whatever happens and whatever arises in the work, they'll be okay. So this is where some of the ruptures can happen, because they're a replay of the things that the child didn't get when they were growing up. If the child got all of these things, it's highly likely they're not going to be a client of yours, because they're not going to go and need to see a therapist. They'll be able to navigate their adult world very comfortably. So if we can get the client to that point where they've got a natural curiosity, we've talked about this before, to start exploring themselves in the world, then we're on a good pathway to recovery. Let's say that, yeah? So it's important to think about this concept of mutual regulation, and that it does carry through in our work with clients, that we are now becoming that mutual regulator for them. And so sometimes the ruptures, which are very painful for clients, is because we may have potentially impinged on some of these very things that are important for recovery. To think about that, trauma actually shatters regulation. I'm just going to move us down here so you can see that great picture. Let me just move it here. So the alliance is the overall bond between the therapist and the client. Yeah, and it was talked a little bit about in that paper that I gave you. It provides a bridge to reconnect the client to themselves safely and kindly. So it's almost like our clients can borrow our kindness. Our clients can borrow our hope. Our clients can borrow our love for life and possibly for them, if I be as bold to say that we could love our clients, not in a sexual way, but as in one human loving another human being and the suffering that they're experiencing. And so the alliance is a bridge. When we have a rupture, then it might put a bit of a block in the bridge, you know, so now there's a little bit of a stumbling block. A serious rupture could actually blow the bridge up. And then the repair is about rebuilding that bridge, and the bridge will never be the same again. We can't go back to how it was. Hopefully we move to a place that's more useful for the client. Yeah. How long the bridge repair takes depends on how many materials and resources and time we have to repair the bridge. If we're working in a very short time frame, it's almost impossible to repair big ruptures, because they don't get, you know, if you use this metaphor of the bridge, it doesn't happen overnight. It's piece by piece, and that the client and I rebuild the bridge together, and it might have a different shape and it may look different. Yeah. So the alliance is the way to help our clients connect in a common humanity, which helps with aloneness as well. And that can be another rupture when clients feel like here they finally found someone who is special and important to them, and then we do something to stuff that up inadvertently, and suddenly they're alone again. Oh, this person's disappointed me now, just like everybody else has. Another potential painful rupture for the client. We need to help the client experience a secure base of attachment. We need to be that secure base. We need to be consistent. We need to be caring. We need to be responsive. And once again, that comes back, we can't do that if you've got really heavy caseloads. It's just impossible. Yeah. But if we can develop this alliance, and we might have to build a few bridges, sometimes you have to let the bridge go and start building a new bridge, because some bridges may never ever be repairable for whatever reason. And so rather than trying to continue to repair, we might say, how about we start again, and let's start from scratch again and get to know each other again. And sometimes it's a new bridge we build. But if we keep doing that, clients start to develop this internal safety and trust in themselves. That's the repair work. So it's a little bit like the only way our muscles strengthen is through the little mini tears that happen in the muscle fiber when we do strength work. So that's how muscles get stronger. When those little mini tears heal, those healed tears are stronger than the muscle was before. So these little breaks actually create more strength. So to not be afraid of ruptures. Ruptures are an important part of the work. And it's how we repair the rupture that really then helps this client develop an inner strength and inner safety and a capacity that they can deal with whatever's arising, disappointment, hurt, with someone who they know cares for them and won't judge them. And then this expression, droplets of self-compassion. I'll give you a reference at the end of tonight. It's a great book written by a woman called Deirdre Fay, and she talks about droplets of self-compassion, which I think is really nice. It is a droplet. It's not suddenly, you know, I have great kindness and compassion for myself, but there's moments where we start to see the client being able to be kinder to themselves. And that's also one of the byproducts of effective repair, is that this self-compassion starts to really kick in. Does that make sense? So effective trauma therapy, when we're working with clients, like in the pictures, isn't that great? This new version of PowerPoints, I just love it.
Yeah.
So it values warmth, empathy, and compassion. Well, that shouldn't surprise us by now, because we've looked at some of these things. And when we looked at embodiment, you know, you can embody this quality of warmth. You can also embody frustration, exhaustion, and don't care. And clients, particularly if there's been early developmental trauma, will pick up on that straight away. Yeah. And they'll go immediately into their relational patterns. So they'll either try and get a response from you by goading you and getting you frustrated and aggravated. And they'll do that either by withdrawing or attacking. So if we hold a lens that whatever is coming towards us is as a result of what we're sending back towards the client, and that it's this mutual interchange, then we have a big part to play in helping the client regulate and be a little bit more stable. And particularly when we're repairing a rupture, warmth, empathy, and compassion for yourself and for the other is really important. So, you know, I see some therapists repair because they've been told they have to repair. And this is the work, we repair. But they do it in a fairly mean-spirited, non-compassionate way, which actually isn't a repair for the client in any way. But to actually be able to, what I often say, fall on your sword and actually in a warm, honest, congruent way, you know, I really messed up here. Or, you know, if the language is right, I really fucked up here. I just want to take a moment to check in with you on this. I can remember fairly early in my career, I was working with a guy who had been survivor of, he'd been a boys' boarding school, and there'd been lots of, he'd been raped quite a number of times, and there'd been abuse from teachers. And I saw him when he was in his 40s. He'd never been in a relationship. He was still a virgin. He was wanting to start to date, and he talked to me about the fact that he just couldn't bear anyone touching him. And his story really impacted me. And when we went to finish that day, I was more to soothe me than to help him. As he was walking out, my fingers just lightly touched his shoulder, and I felt him recoil immediately. So big rupture, okay? And so when he just sort of scuttled away, and I thought, should I call him? I thought, no, I'll wait till he comes back. So when he came back the next session, I said, I just want to talk to you about, before we start today, what happened at the end of our last session, because I really overstepped a few things. And I just wanted to let you know what was happening for me and why I think it happened. So I explained to him how I was moved by his story and that I felt a great degree of sadness, but I inadvertently touched him to try and deal with my own sadness, and that's for me to deal with and not to, you know, so I explained all that. And it was quite an amazing, we immediately had an alliance. From that moment on, we had an alliance. And we worked together for 3 or 4 years. And I remember our last session, he said to me, I'd like to have a hug, if we can have a hug. And so we had a hug, and it was a nice long hug and a little bit of a cry. We both had a little bit of a cry because he'd found a girlfriend and they were getting married, and it was all that stuff. And so there's a sense of, that's the warmth, empathy, and compassion. Empathy and compassion for myself, that I was quite moved by his story, but also a warmth and empathy towards him and how my distress had become his distress. You know, and I'd actually use that. My distress became your distress. He said, that's the story of my life. You know, so sometimes these situations can be very, very useful. Now, of course, I'm telling you a good story. There's plenty of stories where I really fucked up and never couldn't repair it. Okay. So don't think it's always rainbows and sunbeams. Sometimes it's not good, but we do what we can do. So we need to be able to help clients to regulate their dysregulated state so that they can regulate their internal states. And we've been talking a lot about this. And the things we've looked at up till now, embodiment, concept of embodiment, somatic resonance, choice, action, and working with the window of tolerance. You've already got these skills. These are the key things we need to draw on when we're trying to really work effectively with trauma therapy and rupture and repair. Yeah. So when we look at these concepts of rupture and repair, this one over here might suggest that's rupture, where the client, you know, may not actually show it this way. And we're going to explore in a minute your experiences of rupture and repair. So I'm going to ask you to share some thoughts. But there are many things that can cause rupture for a client. Yeah. And it's important that we don't have this set thing of what we're looking for. Oh, that's rupture, because everybody is different. And if we're really in the moment with the client, walking alongside them, then the ruptures will arise in a way that's relevant to that client, and we may never see it with anyone else ever again. So we can have some general things that we keep an eye out for, but to be mindful that your internal barometer is most probably the best guide to whether there's been a rupture. Yeah. And repair is hopefully where then the client feels a little bit more open, a little bit more relationally connected. And so we're going to be moving in between these two states quite a lot when we're doing the work. Okay. And that's absolutely okay. Okay. So in Ed's model, this sort of optimal window for relationship building, if we look at this, it talks about the window of arousal. So that's the optimal zone in the window of tolerance. And this squiggly line is experience, where sometimes the client is matched, yeah, and they develop some resiliency, yeah, but sometimes there's a mismatch as well. And that can be like, oh, it doesn't work. And then they get matched again, and then a mismatch. And remembering good old, oh God, what was his name? The guy that did the infant research, not Bowlby, Winnicott, the good enough parent. We need to be the good enough therapist. We're not going to catch everything, but we also don't want to keep it so sweet and nice that the client, that there's never any sort of opportunity for the client to get disappointed. So in the mismatch, that's the rupture. Yeah. And if we can call it and then repair it, then the client will feel met, and that might be a match. My experience has been when you work with this model, clients will very quickly learn that it's safe for them to raise when you've done something that's really annoyed them and you haven't picked it up. And that's really incredibly valuable when a client says, I want to talk to you about what you said last week. You really pissed me off when you said that, and I went home and I couldn't sleep that night. And I want to understand why you said that, and blah, blah, blah. We need to welcome that, because that's an opportunity for the client to be heard, to be met, but also often it's about trying to understand what was happening for you, Shirley, when you did that. Because there's a sense of, it's not all about the client. You know, the client's not the one that's got all the problems. The therapist has just got as many problems. What was happening, and so that I can understand it's not just about me, that you stuff up too, that you make wrong choices. Sometimes it might be that we have to clarify what we were saying because the client heard it through their trauma lens and not through the therapy lens. And so sometimes we have to restate, yeah. And in that meeting, the mismatch or the rupture, it's really important that we always check in with the client. You know, is this making sense? If this is not making sense for you, let's keep working with this. How do you think this needs to shape our relationship as we move forward? There's the bridge building. What could I do to be more aware of this? So like, I know an example for a client I've worked with this, when I started working with her, she was a she, and I've worked with her for 8 years, and now she's transitioning to a they. And I've had all sorts of problems trying to use the they pronouns and also his new name. And it's been really challenging for me. And this client keeps saying to me, every time you say that, just really jars at me, and can't you see me? And so we've had to really work with it. But they now sort of know, they've said to me, I know that you're trying to do this, and that's more than what a lot of people are trying to do. So we won't always be perfect at it, but it's the sincere attempt to do that. So a little bit like some clients love the weighted blanket in sessions. So once we establish that in session, I always have it sitting here on the lounge, waiting for them. If I forget, where's the blanket? Rupture. Okay. Oh, I forgot the blanket. You know, let me go and get the blanket. How did that feel for you, that I forgot the blanket? You must feel, you know, that I don't know, you imagining I don't care, or I was just too busy. What was happening for you? So we invite and we explore. Yeah. So if we understand that there's this process that's happening in the optimal window, and bearing in mind that they've got enough nervous system regulation to be able to tolerate the matching and the mismatching, but there's a resilience that grows out of that. Yeah. And if they'd had that early on and as a child, we wouldn't now be having it now as an adult. It takes longer as an adult. Like this client I was working with this afternoon, we're only early in our relationships, about 6 sessions, but lots of childhood trauma. She's a survivor of cult abuse. And she's got this huge fear about doing the wrong thing. And I wanted to give her a fun exploration of doing something wrong and not getting into trouble. So I asked her to throw the tissue box at me. I want you to throw the tissue box at me and see what it feels like for you to throw. I can't do that. And so we had this big discussion about, you know, throwing the tissue box. And then she threw the box. She said, I don't want to hit you. I said, no, that's fine. Just throw it in my general direction. And so she threw it. And then we explored how that felt. And then she said, oh, I'd like to throw it again, but could I hit your shoulder this time? And so she really got into the exercise, you know. And so there was this, like, we were going back. I said, at what point do you think it would be too dangerous for me? She said, I suppose if I throw it at your head. You know, I said, yeah, so we don't want that, you know. And so there was this thing for her, and she said, this is wonderful. I've never been allowed to do anything naughty. And I said, and this is pretty low grade on the scheme of naughty, isn't it? Because I can duck and weave, you know, you could try and get me, but you won't get me, sort of thing. And made a bit of a game. And this is one of the things we'll talk about later. If you can be playful in this, it's much easier for the client to get the new experience than making it this very big, deep, meaningful, new agey sort of, you know, rebirthing type process, but light, bright, and enjoyable. Yeah. So yes, when we were doing it, I actually said, it seems like you're a little bit more resilient than you thought you were. She said, yeah, I've never tried to do the wrong thing before. So if we can, but she was in her optimal zone, so she could tolerate that. Yeah. So I wanted to spend a little bit of time just reflecting on the question that I posted to you, which was to reflect on those moments when ruptures occurred in your work and what was present in your repair process that you used that was useful to repair. And also, if you've got thoughts or reflections on when it was challenging to repair, that's also useful to explore. What I'm going to do is I'm going to stop the share. So actually, no, I'll just turn my video back on again, I think. It'd be nice for you to see my facial.
Yes, Shirley, I missed your moving face.
My moving face. My moving face. I was saying to Meg a little earlier, I never realized before, but I have quite a mobile face. You must probably noticed. And but we know that the ventral vagal part of the nervous system, which is the social engagement, is controlled by the facial muscles, the trigeminal, the orbicularis oris, there's another one, I can't remember the name of it now. Oh, the gracilis, which is the one that does your forehead. And so when you're sort of moving and lifting your eyebrows and smiling, that keeps you in social engagement. And that must be a survival thing for me, because I've always had a very mobile face. So somehow I must have twigged that felt good and that people would engage with me.
Yeah, it was
as
well
a child.
received. Yeah.
So I learned that very early on to, you know, have an engaging face and like that. But it also, the byproduct that does keep me a little bit in social engagement. which is a healthy part of the nervous system, hopefully. Anyhow, I digress. So it would be interesting. Let's explore. And you don't have to, you know, tell your war stories and stuff, but what I'm hoping for us to get out of this is, you know, what was present for you mainly to repair is most probably the most important thing. What do you need for repair to be successful in a relationship? And when is it challenging to repair? We can have a bit of an open discussion. Can everybody see everybody else?
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess I'll start. I'll just start by making a general statement about how, yeah, like I was sort of mentioned before about, yeah, the supervision I have with my primary supervisor. And, you know, we could call him a very kind of clinical, concrete, cognitive person. But what I love about the way he supervises me is, you know, this whole idea of deliberately practicing things, but also that mistakes are good. And you want to rupture, because if you're not rupturing, you're being too sweet and you're not actually getting in there and doing anything kind of worth doing. And yeah, so it's been cool to yeah, lean into that, and that kind of mistakes are good and they help you grow. And even if complaints come in, it's a public system, like complaints aren't bad, they're actually good, because we want our consumers to be empowered. And the whole kind of thing too with deliberate practice is that there's a culture of feedback, and there's kind of like, you know, brief measures that we can do to kind of track like their well-being, but also how the session was. And sort of the session rating scale is not like, you know, would you hang out with me on the weekend, but did you feel heard by me? And by implementing that into, you know, my work at the pain management unit, I've been amazed by the number of times when I have thought like that everything was going really swell and that I did a really great job, and then to kind of, and that I was keeping the pulse of the relationship throughout the session, only to find at the end, when I asked about it in a very deliberate, concrete way, to kind of go through it with a fine-tooth comb, that they had, you know, taken offence at the way I had paused in a particular way when they'd said something really big. And yeah, it's really amazing to actually like have that culture of feedback where someone feels comfortable to kind of say, well, I didn't feel comfortable saying at the time, but now when you ask, like, it actually, I thought you judged me when I said that I, you know, wanted to consider euthanasia, like, and I was able and had the opportunity to explain, oh, I actually wasn't judging at all. I actually was just wondering how I should go about responding. Like, I sort of was shocked, and I'm really sorry that you thought that I was judging you, because I really want to empower you to make whatever choice you need to. So it's been like, I've really I've learned a lot. And I guess just to reiterate what I said before, I think what's challenging about this work is, you know, in my case management of young people, like, it is really hard when there's ruptures that happen, and like for the sake of, like, with parental distress involved, which means that the parents are the ones requesting new case managers and stuff, and there's not the opportunity to repair with the young person. I think that's quite, especially being so early in my career, it's kind of hard for me to sit with that sense that there was a rupture that will go unrepaired, and that will kind of flow into that, yeah, that trauma kind of legacy.
Yes. Like, I wonder in that, Meg, and others would be useful for your input too, whether that could be sort of preordained is not the right word, but mentioned up in the upfront contracting. Sometimes things go a little astray, and I may say things that, you know, upset you or whatever. And even if we finish our work or we don't get to finish our work, that you could feel okay to connect with me and check in with me, you know, almost contract that up front a little.
Yeah, that's a nice idea, Shirley. And I think it's interesting too to reflect that, yeah, where I do kind of the, you know, the outcome and session rating scales and stuff is within more of the pain management unit, whereas in the case management, it's so much sort of like the constraints of the heavy burden system that I feel like you can't implement some of those things that are more like kind of quality assurance sort of measures.
Yes.
But that's a lovely thing to kind of just as a kind of routine thing, just like like sometimes things go pear-shaped, and I like that.
Just to sort of slip it in, because there may, when that happens then, and they may reflect back and think about you, they may remember that. And they may say, I wonder if that's what, when Meg said things sometimes go pear-shaped, this could be an example of that. You know,
nice.
Almost as a sort of a setup that this could happen, particularly when you haven't got control at the other end. And so from a case management perspective, we're not really doing therapy as such there, are we? You're really doing all the really great sort of coordination stuff and important things for this client, where there can still be rupture, but a chance to sort of just set that up and give them permission to be upset and angry with the system as well. When it lets them down, and you sort of become the representative for the system.
That's
you become
right.
the easy scapegoat when the system fucks up.
That's right.
Yeah.
And that makes it hard for me to repair as well.
Yes.
When I feel like I'm carrying the burden of a fucked up system entirely on my shoulders because of my whole history of carrying, you know, the overburdened responsibility of like a family, you know, when that then becomes that, you know, I become overburdened by the stresses and pitfalls of the system, that I find that hard to repair for as well, I guess, until I do my own reflecting and my own work around the factors that were about me, because there always are those factors.
Yes, yeah. But I suppose
no matter how bad the system is, there are always the factors about me that contributed to the rupture.
There is, but I suppose let's imagine you're driving along the highway and suddenly, you know, your car breaks down and you're stranded along the side of the highway. And I'm quite sure where this is going. I'm thinking out loud as we're going here. And you're stranded alongside the highway, and you can kick the car and you can blame the car, and it might feel good. And in a way, that's a nice release. But the car doesn't care, because the car is just the car. Like, you know, kick me away because, you know, I know it's not me. It's that damn petrol tank, or it's that left tire, or but it's not necessarily me. So you aren't the system. You are just, you're just a wheel in the system, and you're a damn good wheel, and you're most probably compensating for some other lousy parts of this car. But sooner or later,
that's such a lovely analogy on the spot, Shirley. Thank you.
Sooner or later, the car's going to break down, but we've still got one good wheel.
Yeah. That's such a lovely analogy. Thank you for that gift.
So it's not totally fucked.
That's right. And I think too, in coping with my own distress about that situation, you know, my supervisor sort of said, like, it may be incredibly regulating for angry mum to vent her anger at you, like, rather than you wearing that, you can sort of sit in knowing that that's her way of regulating.
Yes, absolutely. So just before we move on, Rachel, I just wanted to, I want to summarize that then. So for Meg, what helps you is that you work within a culture that fosters working with rupture and repair.
Yes, so within the supervision relationship, there's a culture of feedback where I also give him feedback about, well, actually, I felt like we went a bit too cognitive and concrete today and actually need a bit more touchy-feely emotional stuff. And, you know, and that's fun and playful, you know, because in some extent we embody the entire different ends of the spectrum. And that can still work, like it can still be really fun and playful. So by having that experience with a supervisor, I then am able to gift that on and pay that forward to the client, who I know what experiencing a culture of feedback is like, so I can bring that into the relationship
Yes.
with the client. Yeah.
So that might be
and
something.
be non-defensive and know how to say sorry, and
Yes.
know that the person may never have received an apology from a healthcare worker before, and I may be the first and the only person that ever actually says a sincere apology for, no matter how big or small, within that, you know, that fallible,
Exactly.
you know, public healthcare system that we work in.
Yes, that's the one good wheel.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and that might be useful for others to hear too, because it feels like you're living that philosophy, and therefore it's easier then to work with it day in, day out. Beautiful. Rachel.
I love talking about this rupture and repair topic. I'm probably going to go to the second part of the question first. The challenging and the repair, and like you said before, there are ones that you entirely effed up. But for me, I think because I have a special focus on the complex trauma, complex developmental trauma, which yes is a lot of the BPD, on a spectrum I have a larger portion, I would say like 95% that are amazing clients, and then the sticky end ones. And I think while we're talking about this, they are the ones that really also hurt you, meaning being the therapist in that relationship, in that rupture. I think I can, you feel, obviously we're in that therapeutic alliance and that relationship, but when the rupture happens, and I've had ones that are, to a degree, I've been boundary, maintain all those kind of things in the way that we professionally practice, but then it's almost like the abuse and the assault is so intense, and essentially the client wants me to be their mother from all the complex developmental trauma things. And there is a fine line in that rupture, even for me, that I have to work with as the therapist, of how much then I can tolerate. And there are times that I've even had to say to myself, I don't think I can do this, which is quite rare for me when I'm actually a psychologist that people seek when they've gone on from so many other things.
Yes.
And I find that part interesting, because even I ask myself question over and again, like, how much more? And no matter, like, I put the apologies in, we'll address it. The contracting at the beginning, you know, can we work on our relationship? You know, that's why when I was listening to what Meg was saying, is it a language that we can softly reframe? There's just all those things when a rupture occurs that you then have to sort of self-reflect and try to then repair. And obviously these are your worst case ones that stick with you, and you always tend to remember them. And I think as we were talking, it's like it's difficult then to monitor how much that rupture then happens with you as the therapist.
Yes, so like, can it unpack you then as well?
Yeah.
And that, which could then have a sort of a domino effect on the rest of your work.
Yeah, because with my supervisor, I think, over time I've used the words like projection and then projective identification, where the client will almost manifest it so that it then occurs, where the rupture actually happens. And constantly, like Megan, what you've been saying, I'll tend to call it out, but we'll have a conversation about it. Did I say something? And I'll often say sorry. But on the stickier end ones, sometimes there are times where you feel like no matter how much you apologize or try to have that level of empathy and compassion, it's still not enough.
Yes, and it's a beautiful one, Rachel. And I don't know if this feels relevant or pertinent, but having worked with a lot of BPD clients, I think there comes a point in the work where it's not necessarily about apologizing anymore, but it's about being with the messiness of hurt and pain.
Yeah.
And that even though it wasn't my intention to hurt you, you are in great hurt and great pain. And that no matter how much I acknowledge that, it's not going to make it any better. I wonder what is the work for us both now with this is in the room.
Yeah,
because life is hurt and pain. And we've created this in our relationship, which might be a real shock for you because, you know, we've been really close.
Yeah.
I feel hurt. You feel hurt. We're both feeling pain. Is there some juice in this for us, that for us both to feel what hurt and pain feels like in a relationship that felt good and now it doesn't feel good?
Oh yeah, I like that. That's very good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because that's,
yeah.
That particularly with clients with BP, that BPD presentation, that's the thing, that's the work, that's the juice.
Yeah.
Because it is about, you know, they're always wanting to be the special. They're always wanting to get more out of, you know, do you have any clients as hard as me? You know, that sort of viewpoint. Please tell me I'm your worst client. And you give me all these favors and things. And then sometimes it is about calling that, you know, life sometimes isn't great. And this is a moment where we're not great. And rather than trying to make it nice, how about we both acknowledge this is not great? And whether we can get through this or not, I don't know.
It's interesting, even as I hear you say that, I can feel that sense of calm as well.
Yes.
Because, you know, whenever you talk about your effed up ones that went messy and a rupture happened, it always, I mean, I can always feel my own responses because it's not a nice degree. So when you said that, I just felt this same as
you'd feel that sort of the calming.
Yeah.
Yes, because in a way we're removing ourselves from the fixing the impossible.
Yeah.
Because clients with BPD have a great knack of setting up the impossible.
Yes.
And so we just collapse that and say, this is may not be fixable. And then it requires them to weigh up what is worthwhile in working with me alongside what's not worthwhile. Yeah. And that's life, isn't it? That no one person is going to be everything for you, even though that's what BPD wants. They want that one love, you know. Am I going to be enough with all of this for us to continue? Yeah,
I like that. It's a good way to sort of I mean, I can
to call it
that and let that language a lot better.
To just really call it and get them to stop the sort of annihilating you, that narcissistic annihilation. And actually starting to own their part in the relationship. Now that can be very challenging for BPD clients because they can really only hold one, and that's themselves. So, but I think that's the repair, actually, to not say sorry.
Okay. No, that, because that's what, you know, when you were talking about contracting, and I mean, on most majority of the time, a lot of the instances that you've spoken about work, and in my mind I was sort of thinking about the times when it just doesn't.
Exactly.
When no matter what you try.
And I think that requires us to lean more into the fire of the unknowing and sit with, this is make or break for us. We may come out the other end or we may not. And I don't even know how I'm feeling about what that would be at the moment, but I feel this is critical for us both. We've got time, we've got space, let's work on it.
So good. I like it. Really good.
So it's like an honesty. It's a relational honesty rather than, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean that. You know, it needs to be deeper. Beautiful.
Good.
Fantastic, Rachel.
Thank you.
Kate, any thoughts?
Hey, I wonder, can you give me an example for you, Shirley, of when, you know, I'm just wondering what, I mean, I'm sure I do it, like, you know, maybe I don't really, like, there's a lot where I'm having to, I guess, where, you know, to say that's not quite it, like, and I feel it too, and it's like, oh, I don't think I've got it, you know, can we go through this again, like, and, you know, and that's probably kind of the level that it's at. So I must be doing something wrong to not get some really bad feedback back in a way, I think. And in a way I do offer it, but I am a bit shy about, it's hard for me to almost receive, I think, good feedback. You know, I'm like, oh, sweet, that's good. Let's just get to the shit. Like, okay, I kind of almost want the critical stuff, but so I don't know if I'm almost creating an energy there, like, you know.
Well, it's a beautiful reflection, Kate. It takes me back to early on in my career where I remember saying to my supervisor, you know, I'm such a shit hot therapist. I remember saying exactly that. You know, all my clients love me. Like, I've got clients who said they've never had as good a therapist as me, and that I never get angry at them and all of that. And remember her looking at me and she said, really? You're proud of that? I said, absolutely. And she said, what would happen if they said they didn't like you? And I started to cry. And I said, oh, it'd be like means I've failed.
Yeah.
You know, and so she beautifully and sensitively unpacked my ego to the point where a few weeks later I reported I had a client get really angry at me, you know, and I felt like I'd really made a shift. And I think the shift that I made, and it's only my experience, so this may not be relevant to you, was that I just became more real. I stopped accommodating behavior that was really irritating me and putting like this sweet lens on it. I'm not saying that's what you're doing, but I actually just started calling clients on stuff. And actually they were very resilient and they were able to deal with it really well and really appreciated it. So it took some courage on my behalf to, I picked clients who I knew wouldn't get too narky with me to begin with, but it was a little bit like stepping into a more honest, courageous frame. It's not an argumentative frame, but it's a willingness to sort of invite honesty and authenticity.
Well, Kate, can I? Oh, sorry. I was just gonna follow what Shirley was saying about like, like receiving feedback and everything within the like feedback informed treatment approach, which is just an approach. It's not an intervention in its own right. It's just an approach and a way of creating a culture of feedback. But within that, there is like this idea that the lower the score, like the better therapists out there get lower scores on the session rating scales. And they get lower scores because their clients feel more comfortable giving them more honest, open feedback. Whereas it's easy to just give someone 10, 10, 10, oh, everything's great, because there's never any dialogue associated with that. The therapist is always just, oh, I'm doing a sweet job. And so I remember when I got my lowest score on the session rating scale, and I went into Nathan, I was like, I just got my lowest score ever. And he gave me a high five. And it's just, it's awesome to feel like that's so welcome to receive that honesty in session. But it seriously takes a while to get comfortable with. I know as my appeasing, people pleasing sort of self, it was this process.
And the client knows that you're going to see that score.
Yeah, they tell me. I ask them, and they tell me.
Great. Yeah, lovely.
Well, the thing is, I poke every button there is, so it's not like I pussyfoot around ever. That's the problem.
But the thing is, it's not about challenging and poking the client.
No,
it's about owning what
I'd like to think I don't completely smash them.
No, but it's about noticing them in relation to you, relationally, not about material.
Yeah.
And it can be things like, you know, missing appointments or arriving late, or suddenly changes in how they engage with you. Or if there are opportunities for them to move into something, do we notice that but that doesn't matter, let's talk about this sort of thing, and deflect or move away. And you may be already catching all of that.
Maybe I mean could do we don't really do a feedback scale. So I mean, we might notice, like you said, by those things, sure.
But you could even do something just with the client in the room. Just say to them, before we finish today, I'm wondering, and I'm really happy if this wasn't useful for you to hear that. So that we can make it better. What would you like more of? What would you like less of?
One of my favorite questions is there anything that I said or didn't say that would mean that you wouldn't come back again? And I think that's I'm in public, but I think if I were in private, that would probably be even more pertinent.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Sometimes sorry, Kate, go on.
Oh, I was just going to say, after the first, I mean, I always ask them to reflect on the session and and see how they're feeling afterwards. But I could do it then and there. Like, I definitely want to get the feedback more than anything.
Yes. We specifically want the feedback about you, not the session.
That's what it's about anyway, isn't it?
Well, no. If we say the clients are, how was the session? Oh, session was great, thanks, whatever. But if you make it more personal about, I'm wondering, from all the stuff we explored today, do you feel like I'm meeting your needs, or you make it about you, not about the material.
Mm.
That's often where the rupture is. It's not about the material. Yeah. And possibly, you know, because you're a lovely, warm, empathic, compassionate soul, and the clients may really love that in you and really enjoying that with you. And they don't want to rupture that because they may not have that anywhere else. And so therefore it's not about necessarily trying to mess them all up and make the sessions really torturous for you both.
No.
But you know, looking for those little moments where they may be accommodating, being nice to keep the connection going.
I notice some compliance, I have to say.
Yes.
There's some.
So,
but, you know, I always say there's nothing you could say to me, you know, that's going to change my empathy or how I feel.
Yeah, but that needs to be
words.
demonstrated. Like
Yeah,
I suppose another way of exploring that, I'm wondering if there's something there you just really think I need to know, but you're not sure where we could go with that. Is that something you'd like? Let's give it a go. Let's see.
Yeah, okay.
Invite them a little bit, or you could even set it up even more by saying, you know, sometimes I get a sense that there are some things here we touch in on, but we don't really go in. And I'm wondering, first of all, are you aware of that? And I'm wondering if that's, you know, you're concerned about how I might actually respond to that. Or what's your view of what being a client is, being a good client? My clients come along and they apologize for being emotional. You know, I don't want to upset you. And I sort of say to them, well, look, you know, I've been doing this for 25 years. You know, tears and anger, they're all just messengers. Let them all come. We want them all. Don't have to ever apologize for that, you know. So there's this fantasy. We want to keep this relationship really sweet and nice and precious. But we can still have sweet, nice and precious, but honest and open as well.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Because some of that can be the repeat, particularly if there's early childhood stuff, of keeping, not that you're the abuser in any way, Kate, but keeping that more power role happy. That's the, you know, the fawn response, the friend response. Yeah.
No, that's good. And
yes,
it's really I guess really important to notice what their, of course, knowing what their background is, and then how they're what kicks in for them, you know, and how they relate, if you like.
Exactly. Exactly.
Perfect. Good. They're good questions, you know. They're the things I'm at a loss sometimes and how to ask them. But I guess I do keep coming back to the goal, I have to say, of the measure of where they were going to, but that changes anyway. And but it doesn't quite get to it like that. Do you feel I'm meeting your needs? I'd like to see.
Yes, that's the more personal.
What that, and how that is, because you'll pick it up straight away, whatever response they give you. Whether they,
exactly.
Like that's great.
Yeah, so some useful thinking, like when I think about this, you know, things that make it challenging for me to repair is where if I'm feeling tired, or I've got a story going in my head that this client is totally stuffed and no therapist would be able to help them, and so, you know, well, let's just end the misery now. You know, so there's a sense of I've really lost the view. And so, you know, that's sort of, I would always take something like that to supervision and explore. Or if I feel a great care for the client, but in the repair, there has to be some real honesty that could be quite hurtful for the client. So do I want to keep them in the fantasy of their fantasy? Or do I want to open up their awareness a little bit? And sometimes that feels, do I have the right to do that? Can anyone pay anybody enough money to do that? And when do I do it? And, you know, that doesn't seem necessarily an appropriate thing for one human to do to another. So that's often where, you know, so it's a more an ethical, philosophical quandary that I might take to supervision about that. So you might be noticing opportunities for repair in your work, but you haven't done anything yet because you're not sure. Take it to supervision. and work it through. Yeah. Beautiful. So if we were having a look at, well, how do we manage where there's been rupture, or what we call triggered responses, you know? So a couple of things is only visit the past when the client's in the present.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
Mm.
Only visit the past when the client is in the present. And I make a bit of a contract with most of my clients. I'm happy to go back and explore that, but can you tell me, are you present right now? What's telling you that you're present right now? Can you feel your feet? You know, okay, as soon as we start to lose any of those, we stop. Yeah. Work with the dual process model. Now, I'm not sure if you're familiar with this. This is some of Babette Rothschild's work and Pat Ogden, where the concept of dual process is that there are two things going on for trauma survivors. One is the flashbacks and triggers of the trauma. So, for example, sitting with me and feeling panicked with me, yet they're safe with me. There's nothing in the space that's actually really causing them any danger. So the dual process model there's a range of questions. I'll scan it and send you some more information about it so you can get a general idea, but you'd need to do some more reading before you use it.
Thank you. That'd be great.
It's a range of questions you ask the client around, what are you noticing in you right now? Let's check the environment around you right now. It's really sort of like a bit more of a CBT, sort of bringing them into taking a sense of where are they, what are they feeling, am I safe, what tells you that you're okay, let's breathe, let's move, let's check in with that feeling now. So it's a process of when those old trauma feelings come in, to recognize that they are the past visiting the present, but I have the capacity in the present to stay present and not get sucked back into the past. And so it's a strategy when you're working with clients to help them deal when they're outside of session, when stuff comes up, flashbacks, triggers, things like that, yeah? It's also useful when you're repairing, because when clients say, oh, you're just wanting to, prove that I'm a dickhead, that's trauma story. That's never my intention. So then I'll work with dual process to say, do you really think, after all the sessions we've had, that if I didn't want to call you a dickhead, I'd just call you a dickhead? Why would I be surreptitious about it? Oh yeah, you're right. Yeah. So it's like the dual process model is really useful for unpacking the rupture in the present moment when it's coming from a trauma trigger, like the scapegoating that happens. Yeah. Try and collaborate with the client to make sense of what's arising and tempt the client to become fascinated with their inner world. So that comes back to that earlier about developing this curiosity, and so in a rupture and a repair, like this is what happened. How would it be for you if we never were able to repair this? How would it be for you if we were to repair it? What needs to happen? So we start to get the client engaged in the work as well. So it's not a one-person model. And try and support the client to observe and be what's happening in the present moment, so they can really hear the dialogue that's going on in the repair. Yeah. On a more somatic sense, we'd want to ground the client back into their spine. Can we just pause for a moment? I want to talk and explore what's going on here. Feel your feet, feel the floor under your feet, sit into your spine. I might even invite sound, like humming, moaning, or groaning is really useful to actually help the client, particularly if they're feeling upset. I want to liberate some of that. So any sort of vocalization I can make. And of course that engages all the facial nerves, which brings people back into ventral vagal social engagement system. Yeah. Take a break if we need to. How about we pause for a sec? Let's make a cup of tea. This is really important. We need to talk about this. But let's take a break for a sec. Everybody can cool down. If you feel you're getting really charged as well. Yeah.
Do you do that off? Oh.
Taking a break?
Yeah.
Not that often, because normally we're titrating the work pretty well. Yeah. But sometimes after something quite big, if there's been a lot of anger and stuff, and then we've ended up with a bit of laughter, I'll say, how about we celebrate with a cup of tea? Yeah. And we get very social. Yeah. And there's something very reparative about that, rather than just pushing on through the work. Yeah, pausing and letting that experience. And I might even end the session on that. So, you know, we have a cup of tea together and then the session ends.
Yeah.
So the client can leave with this feeling like, wow, I really told her. And she took all of that and now we're having a cup of tea and we're best of mates. That wasn't too hard.
Yeah.
Adding a little to the in and the out breath and shoulder cradling. So one of the things that I often work with clients is to self-soothe, is the shoulder cradle. So sometimes just to put a hand on their shoulder and just to sort of rock themselves backwards and forwards. And they can even do a double shoulder cradle. And just do it with them. You know, I get that I've really upset you right now and you're feeling really angry at me and upset and alone. And I want to hear that, and I want to work with you with that, and I want to learn with that, so that together we can be better together. But I just want to help you soothe, and I'm helping myself soothe too at the moment. Do you notice anything when you're doing that?
More like I always notice, because I've done some of Pat Ogden's work, but I always notice the warmth and you know, the skin or the wherever my arms are contacting me on my chest, and it is comforting. That always almost feel like the body just releases to a degree.
And you can hold yourself. Something I should say, if we're rocking forwards and back, that's more when the clients become hypo-aroused. When they're hyper-aroused, it's side to side. So you change the plane in which they move. So anxiety is side to side. Depression or, you know, hypo-arousal is forwards and back.
And you'd get them to do the opposite, did you say?
No, so if they're depressed, hypo-aroused, I'll get them to go forwards and back.
Right, yeah.
If they're hyper-aroused, side to side.
Yeah. It feels I've never held myself in this way before, and I'm holding onto my bones to stay there, and there's something very grounded about that.
Yeah. So shoulder cradling can be quite nice. Another one I might do is front of head. Wait till my camera unfreezes again. Front of head, front of head, back of head, and just rocking forwards and back.
Oh my gosh, that's so nice. The back of your head being cradled, there's nothing quite like it.
If you don't like it, just stop. But that can also be quite soothing, particularly if the client's got really busy mind, can't settle.
I think that's why I like it.
Yeah, just put your hand on your forehead, hand behind your head, and let's just rock together for a moment. Eyes open or eyes closed. And invariably, at some point, you'll get a longer exhale.
No, I just did.
Yeah, you wait for the longer exhale and go, there we go. Soothing. Yeah.
I love that one.
Yep. So these are all repair interventions as well, you know, and that we're demonstrating I can soothe and support you, to soothe and support you. So, you know, we're helping each other, so to speak. And then, go on.
And I was noticing, even when it happened to us, often if I always say we're gonna do an exercise or thing, often there is a level of that humour that comes where they laugh or they do something and then we both laugh together, and I think that is also really helpful in the exercises. Absolutely. Really, we're doing it together. We're doing it, and there's a sense of play. I'm mindful we're going over time, but we'll be finishing in about 5. You know, I've got pillows everywhere, but just grabbing a pillow. Adapted child pose, so you can just hold a pillow and just fold over it, even in the chair. And once again, you can rock. So you can rock forwards and back if you're feeling depressed, side to side if you're anxious. Okay. And so they may be things that I invite the client to do while we're actually repairing the rupture, because that's really powerful if we're engaging the body in the repair, because we're working on all levels of experience, not just hearing I'm sorry. Yeah,
that's awesome. Yeah.
So strategies for work somatically, as the language of attachment is non-verbal. You can't say to someone, you're safe, but they can feel safe. So all these things that we just explored are all somatic strategies that help work with rupture. Yeah. Really practice your own self-regulation and teach it to the client as well. Yeah. Appreciate the value of resistance. We've looked at resistance earlier. Remember, resistance comes up when there's that longed for developmental need that could never be possible to have. So we put resistance up to not let it come in, because that would be overwhelming to let it come in. Yeah. Engage with it as an intelligent expression of the client's safety. Welcome it in. You know, what's this got to tell us? Track your communication interactions on the non-verbal cues. Trust what you feel, not what you think. So that might be fun for you to play with, Kate. You might pick a client and really just try to stay in the felt sense and work with all your interventions coming from felt sense and see. Focus on the relational element to elicit the neurological repair. That's why when we want to explore rupture, it's relational. It's not often you didn't understand what I said. That's just an empathic failure. A rupture is something about the relationship and my worth as another human being in relationship to you. Yeah. Stay close to the client's experience. Allow the client to lead. And we follow curiously. Yeah. And playful. The playfulness is really useful because it enhances the learning, but it turbocharges the new neural pathways when it's through playfulness. Yeah. So if we can bring lightness to the work, it's so, you know, it doesn't mean that the repair is, oh, I'm sorry, I stuffed up, you know, and I'm a silly old duffer, and let's, you know, it's not that. You know, but there's a sense of, you know, in the exploration of some different ways of being, if we can be somewhat more playful, like the tissue box this afternoon, that was useful because it got her to practice something. If I'd said, how about we practice the fact that you can't ever get it right? If I'd set it up like that, that doesn't sound very interesting. But if I say, how about we practice you throwing a tissue box at me and what comes up for you in that, that's playful. Yeah. So I wanted to leave you with this little, I'm going to give you a minute just to read it.
So good.
Beautiful.
Now, this is something that I've took out of Deirdre's book, Attachment-Based Yoga and Meditation for Trauma Recovery. And this might sound a little wanky and new agey, but before I start clinic every morning, I sit and I just say this out loud 3 times, like a little sort of centerer, yeah? And then at the end, like when I leave here tonight, before I go, I'll sit and say this again to myself, like I sort of know it off by heart now. And it's just like a little, so that may not work for you. Find the thing that works for you. So I'm just sharing, this is something that works for me. It reminds me that we've all been in pain and we all suffer and we're all wanting to find peace. And can we be kind and equanimous about it? And that can we meet together in compassion and love? And that becomes something that sits with me when I'm sitting with the client going, oh, fuck, what do I do now? We've all been in pain. Let me meet this person in pain, their pain, you know, because and so it's just a way of keeping me grounded and in the work. So,
thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, and I'll send a copy of the PowerPoints out so you'll have it if you wanted to use it. It's useful. Yeah.
Great.
Okay, guys. Well, any questions we're left with?
No, I love that. That was great. Thank you. And you
Yeah.
said that
That was
book
really
was
great.
attachment based.
Attachment based. Let me just.
Because I've recently become acquainted with Ed Galloway's work. Yeah, Edtronic.
Yeah.
So I'm keen to hear
And
more
some of
about
his books are good too. So attachment based yoga and meditation for trauma recovery.
Great. And Shirley, too, just on a personal note,
Yes.
I'm going to start teaching trauma sensitive yoga at one of the studios here in Geelong. So I was just wondering if you would mind sending out the next course of supervision that you do for the teachers. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
Yes. All right. No worries.
Thank you.
Okay, guys. Well, we're going to meet again for the last one, July 27th, where we're going to be talking about nurturing resilience. So, and this will be something around your own self-care for yourself, but also nurturing that with clients. So that's a good follow-on from this topic.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much.
Have a great night, everybody. We'll see you at the end of July.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye. I think Kate's frozen. You still there, Kate?
Yeah, she might be frozen.
Okay. All right. Okay. Well, we're off. Bye-bye.